I'm convinced that Stonehenge was an astronomical observatory and was also used as a computer for following the movement of the moon around the horizon.
Stonehenge, a structure raised and reshaped across more than a millennium, continues to amaze and astound observers to this day. Massive sarsen stones, some weighing up to 25 tons, stand precisely aligned with the rising and setting sun at key points of the year, especially the summer and winter solstices. The monument sits within a much larger ceremonial landscape of burial mounds, earthworks, and timber structures, all hinting at repeated human gathering, ritual activity, and long-term planning across generations. And despite centuries of excavation and study, no written record survives to explain its purpose directly. But now, rumors are that Grok AI has finally solved the Stonehenge mystery. Today, we'll dive deep into the secrets of his ancient monument, what researchers have suggested about Stonehenge. For more than a century of excavation, mapping, and reinterpretation at Stonehenge, one pattern has repeatedly emerged. Every generation of researchers arrives with a new model, and every model solves part of the puzzle while leaving another part exposed. The monument does not yield a single explanation. In 1963, astronomer Gerald Hawkins published a controversial but influential analysis using early computer calculations to test whether Stonehenge's stone alignments could function as a predictive astronomical system. Working with IBM computers at the time, a novelty in archaeology, Hawkins proposed that sight lines through the monument might track solar and lunar events, including eclipses. His book, Stonehenge Decoded, turned the site into a global debate overnight. The idea was powerful because it reframed Neolithic builders not as ritual-only engineers, but as potential mathematical astronomers. The alignment is real. Stonehenge was clearly built with celestial awareness. So is that it? Well, this is just one idea. Many more brains tugged at this problem for decades afterward. A decade later, attention shifted underground to a ring of 56 subtle depressions known as the Aubrey Holes. Named after 17th century antiquarian John Aubrey, these pits became a focal point for mathematical speculation. In the 1960s and 70s, physicist Fred Hoyle and collaborators suggested that the number 56 might not be arbitrary at all. It is close to 3 cycles of the lunar nodal period of 18.6 years, a cycle describing the slow wobble of the moon's orbit that affects where it rises and sets on the horizon. Hoyle's hypothesis proposed that moving markers between the holes could, in theory, track long-term lunar patterns or eclipse cycles. It was an elegant idea, a prehistoric analog computer buried in chalk soil. As the decades marched on, the focus shifted again, from geometry to sensation. Researchers began asking not just what Stonehenge looked like, but what it sounded like. Stephen Waller and others in the field of archaeoacoustics examined how stone arrangements might interact with sound waves, reflections, and resonance. In controlled experiments, stone circles can indeed create echoes, focusing effects, and spatial sound distortions, especially when combined with human voices or percussion. So, was this it? We'll answer this shortly, but for now, let's move to the late 1990s and early 2000s. The Stonehenge Riverside project, led by archaeologist Mike Parker Pearson, expanded the frame far beyond the stone circle itself. Excavations at nearby sites, such as Durrington Walls, revealed large timber structures, domestic settlements, and evidence of seasonal occupation. A processional avenue connecting the River Avon to Stonehenge suggested movement between river, settlement, and monument as part of a structured ritual journey. In this model, Stonehenge is not an isolated object, but a node in a wider ceremonial network stretching across several kilometers of Wiltshire chalkland. Radiocarbon dating and spatial analysis showed that different parts of this landscape were active at different times, but often overlapped in use. Burial mounds, standing stones, and timber circles form a distributed system of meaning rather than a single centralized design. When we put all of these proposals together, we don't get a single answer. Hawkins saw astronomy. Hoyle saw lunar cycles. Acoustic researchers heard engineered resonance. Landscape archaeologists mapped a living ceremonial system. But what was the original intent behind the structure? We'll get to that shortly. First, let's weigh these claims against modern evidence, shall we? Evaluating the evidence. By the time modern archaeology began systematically testing the competing interpretations of Stonehenge, the monument had already accumulated more than 2 centuries of scientific speculation layered over 4,500 years of original construction history. Excavations and survey work carried out from the mid-20th century onward confirmed that the monument's principal axis is aligned with the solstitial sun. Specifically, the northeast-southwest orientation frames the midsummer sunrise and midwinter sunset with remarkable consistency. This alignment is not incidental. It is embedded across multiple construction phases, including the sarsen trilithon arrangement completed around 2500 BCE. However, when researchers attempt to extend this into a broader predictive system, such as forecasting eclipses or long-term celestial cycles, the evidence begins to thin sharply. The stones provide directional sightlines, not computational precision. No structural features equivalent to calendrical counters, error-correcting mechanisms, or repeatable observational instruments have been identified that would support a fully predictive astronomical machine. The lunar hypothesis, particularly the interpretation of the 56 Aubrey holes, presents a more ambiguous case. Statistically, the number is suggestive. 56 divided by 3 yields approximately 18.6, closely matching the lunar nodal cycle of 18.6 years, which governs the oscillation of the moon's declination. This numerical relationship, first explored in the mid-20th century by Fred Hoyle and others, created one of the most persistent speculative models in Stonehenge research. Yet excavation data complicates the narrative. The holes contain cremated human remains dating from around 3000 to 2500 BCCE, and evidence indicates they were revisited and modified over centuries. Instead of a stable, purpose-built counting system, the archaeological record shows a feature that evolved in use, likely shifting between ritual, funerary, and possibly symbolic functions. There is no direct material trace, such as standardized markers, wear patterns, or consistent repositioning evidence that would confirm a continuous observational device. Similarly, acoustic interpretations are physically demonstrable but interpretively limited. Experimental studies in archaeoacoustics, including controlled testing of stone arrangements, show that circular megalithic structures can produce echoes, standing waves, and focal points for sound reflection. These effects are measurable and reproducible. However, the leap from acoustic properties exist to intentional engineering for physiological manipulation is not supported by excavation data or construction analysis. The geometry of Stonehenge does not exhibit the fine-tuned tolerances required for frequency-specific resonance systems, nor is there evidence of design adjustments based on acoustic measurement. Claims of infrasound targeting, such as precise ranges capable of inducing trance states, remain outside the bounds of verified Neolithic capability. The stones respond to sound, but nothing in the archaeological record demonstrates that they were designed to function as a controlled acoustic instrument. This leaves us with the work conducted under the Stonehenge Riverside Project led by Mike Parker Pearson. The monument sits within a coordinated network of sites across the Wiltshire Chalklands. This includes large timber circles at Durrington Walls, processional avenues connecting the River Avon to the Stone Circle, and dense clusters of burial mounds distributed across the landscape. Radiocarbon dating places many of these features within overlapping time frames, suggesting a long-term, regionally integrated ceremonial system rather than isolated construction episodes. Strontium isotope analysis of human remains further supports this complexity, showing that some individuals buried near Stonehenge originated from distant regions, including Western Britain. This links human mobility directly to the movement of materials, particularly the Welsh origin bluestones transported over 140 to 240 kilometers. The evidence suggests repeated seasonal gatherings, structured movement between river and monument, and ceremonial practices tied to agricultural and solar cycles. But why were they coming here? To do what? Why even make a monument so precise? Before we answer that, Let's understand one thing clearly. Modern AI systems, such as those developed by XAI, including Grok, do not conduct archaeological verification or generate new empirical findings. Instead, they operate by analyzing statistical patterns in large corpora of human-generated text, academic papers, summaries, media narratives, and online discussions. When prompted to explore complex mysteries like Stonehenge, these models synthesize existing hypotheses into unified narrative structures. They can connect lunar theories, acoustic ideas, and landscape archaeology into a single cohesive explanation because those ideas coexist in their training data. However, this synthesis process does not involve testing against physical evidence or prioritizing peer-reviewed consensus. The model does not know which hypothesis is correct in a scientific sense. It generates the most contextually plausible combination of ideas based on linguistic patterns. When prompts emphasize hidden patterns, forgotten knowledge, or AI discovery, the output naturally trends toward convergence narratives. This can create the illusion of a breakthrough, so Grok cannot solve the mystery on its own. It can only give us responses based on prompts and available data, but we will solve the mystery once and for all. What the Stonehenge most likely represents. On the open chalk plains of Wiltshire, the final form of Stonehenge emerged slowly over millennia. Between roughly 3000 BCCE and 1500 BCE, generations of builders reshaped the site repeatedly. One of the most stable features across all these phases is orientation. The monument's axis aligns with the solstitial sun, framing the sunrise at the summer solstice and the sunset at the winter solstice. This alignment is embedded in the earliest earthwork phases and preserved through later stone additions. That consistency matters because it anchors Stonehenge to a predictable natural cycle, the solar year, turning the structure into a fixed reference point in a landscape otherwise defined by change. In practical terms, it would have allowed prehistoric communities to mark seasonal transitions with precision, likely coordinating agricultural timing, migration, and ritual gatherings around these celestial events. But alignment alone does not explain the physical evidence found within and around the monument. Excavations have uncovered cremated human remains dating primarily from the early 3rd millennium BCE, concentrated in and around the stone circle. They are also present in the nearby features like the Aubrey Holes. These are not isolated burials. The scale is significant. Hundreds of individuals, many carefully cremated and placed in discrete locations. The surrounding landscape includes burial mounds, cursus monuments, processional avenues, and large settlement sites such as Durrington Walls, located roughly 3 kilometers northeast of the stone circle. Radiocarbon dating shows that Durrington Walls was heavily occupied around 2600 to 2500 BCE, overlapping with the main phase of Stonehenge's construction. Evidence of feasting, such as large quantities of animal bones, especially pigs, suggests seasonal gatherings involving large populations, potentially numbering in the hundreds or even thousands. This indicates that Stonehenge was not an isolated ritual point, but part of a wider ceremonial system that brought dispersed communities together at specific times of year. The movement embedded in this landscape is particularly revealing. The River Avon appears to form a ceremonial corridor linking Durrington Walls to Stonehenge via a processional avenue. Archaeological analysis suggests that the flow of movement may have been structured. Life and feasting concentrated at Durrington Walls, followed by movement along the river toward Stonehenge, where funerary and ancestral practices dominate. This spatial transition from settlement activity to mortuary space suggests a conceptual geography where direction and journey carried meaning, not just location. Instead of asking what the monument was for in a modern functional sense, the evidence points toward what it did socially. It structured time through solstitial alignment. It structured space through movement between the river, settlement, and stone. It structured memory through the deposition of human remains and the enduring visibility of monumental architecture. In societies without written language, such structures functioned as long-term anchors of collective experience, encoding social rhythms into the landscape itself. The effort required to build and maintain this system over more than a millennium also reveals something about continuity. The precision of construction suggests knowledge passed across generations. All of this without any modern machinery, even writing. But wait, how could they possibly have done it? Engineering a megalithic structure without modern tools. Building. Stonehenge was a prolonged engineering sequence unfolding across roughly 1,500 years, from around 3000 BCE to 1500 BCE. What makes it striking is not just the final form, but the sustained coordination required across generations with no written plans, no metal tools, and no centralized industrial system. The earliest stage began with earthwork, a circular ditch and bank carved into the chalk using antler picks, bone tools, and wooden digging sticks. This alone required the removal of thousands of tons of soil, forming a circular enclosure roughly 100 meters in diameter. Inside this ring, the builders later dug the Aubrey holes, 56 evenly spaced pits that suggest careful planning even at this early stage. These initial features established the geometric foundation of the site long before any stones were raised, indicating that Stonehenge began as a designed space rather than a spontaneous gathering point. The arrival of the sarsen stones marks the most physically demanding phase of construction. These stones, some weighing between 20 and 25 tons, were sourced from the Marlborough Down, about 20 to 25 kilometers north of the site. Geological analysis shows they were shaped using repeated hammering with harder stone tools, gradually smoothing and trimming them into standardized forms. This process alone would have required sustained labor over weeks or months per stone, with each block undergoing incremental refinement rather than rapid carving. The consistency of shape across multiple stones suggests a shared design template maintained across different work teams. Transporting these sarsens to the site required a different kind of engineering problem. Experimental reconstructions suggest that wooden sledges placed on lubricated tracks, likely involving wet clay, animal fat, or water, could reduce friction enough for groups of 20 to 50 people to move multi-ton stones incrementally. Timber rollers may have been used in sections where terrain allowed, but modern experiments indicate that rollers alone are inefficient over long distances on uneven ground. Instead, movement likely relied on a combination of dragging, repositioning tracks, and repeated incremental hauling. A single stone could have taken days or even weeks to move. The bluestones introduce an even more complex logistical challenge. Originating from the Preseli Hills in Wales, roughly 140 to 240 kilometers away, depending on route reconstruction, these stones weigh up to 4 tons each. Geological sourcing, led by researchers such as Richard Bevins and Rob Eichser, has identified specific outcrops, confirming deliberate selection rather than random collection. Their transport involved multiple stages: overland hauling to rivers, flotation or rafting along waterways where possible, and repeated transfer points across terrain. Once at the site, raising the stones into vertical position required careful ground preparation. Excavations show deep foundation pits shaped to receive upright stones, often with one side sloped to allow gradual lowering into position. Timber levers and ropes would have been used to tilt the stones incrementally, while teams stabilized them with packed chalk and rubble. Earth ramps likely played a key role in controlling the final positioning, allowing gradual adjustment rather than abrupt lifting. The precision of alignment seen in the completed structure suggests repeated adjustment during this phase, with stones being corrected before final stabilization. The horizontal lintels, weighing several tons each, represent one of the most technically impressive aspects of the structure. These were lifted into place atop vertical sarsens using a combination of timber scaffolding, earthen ramps, and lever systems. The joints connecting them, mortise and tenon joints on vertical stones and tongue and groove joints between lintels, indicate a carpentry-inspired understanding of load distribution translated into stone. These features are not decorative. They provide structural stability against lateral movement and settling, showing that builders understood long-term mechanical stresses even without formal engineering theory. What makes this even more remarkable is that experimental archaeology has repeatedly demonstrated that such construction is feasible with Neolithic technology, but only under specific conditions. Projects led by researchers such as Julian Richards and others have shown that teams of 100 to 200 people can move and erect large stones, using only replicated ancient methods to do so. However, these experiments also reveal that even though the tasks may appear simple in theory, they require extended coordination, repeated adjustments, and high labor investment. The key limitation is the logistical scale sustained over generations. The construction of Stonehenge was not a single coordinated project in the modern sense, but a sequence of cultural decisions repeated across centuries. Each generation inherited partially completed structures, adapted earlier designs, and added new layers without abandoning the old. Moving stones weighing tens of tons requires cooperation, but sustaining that effort across centuries requires cultural motivation. The repeated investment in the same site indicates that Stonehenge held persistent significance, strong enough to justify enormous communal effort even when the original builders were no longer present. That kind of continuity is rare and points toward a shared cultural framework that persisted beyond individual lifetimes. This brings the question of motivation into focus. The construction of Stonehenge is best understood as part of a broader pattern in Neolithic Europe, where monumental architecture served as a mechanism for organizing communities. Large-scale building projects created shared identity through labor itself. They required coordination, planning, and repeated gathering. This, in turn, reinforced social cohesion. In societies without centralized written administration, monuments function as physical anchors for collective memory and seasonal rhythm. At Stonehenge, the alignment with solstices suggests that timekeeping and seasonal transition played a central role. Communities likely gathered at specific points in the year, marking changes in agricultural cycles or ritual calendars. The presence of cremated human remains further suggests that these gatherings were not purely observational, but deeply connected to death, ancestry, and remembrance. The monument becomes a place where cycles of nature and cycles of human life intersect. The scale of effort involved also implies that construction itself was meaningful. Moving a 25-ton stone is not just a technical task. It is a communal event requiring coordination, trust, and shared purpose. Each stage, from quarrying to transport to erection, would have been a visible demonstration of collective capability. In this sense, the monument was not only a destination, but also a process that reinforced social structure. The stones are not evidence of impossible technology. They are evidence of repeated human effort, accumulated over centuries, shaped by belief, necessity, and tradition. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.